The full moon rose over the border pines, and Ara felt the familiar pull in her bones. She set down the mortar and pestle, dried her hands on her apron, and slipped out the back door of the healer's cottage. The village behind her was settling into evening quiet. Cook fires sent thin ribbons of smoke into the violet sky. Laughter echoed from the communal hall where the pack would gather soon, as they always did when the moon climbed high. She would not be among them tonight. She never was. Before we begin her story fully, if you believe in second chances like she does, please subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Ara followed the narrow deer path into the woods, her boots silent on the moss. 5 years she had walked this route. 5 years of careful distance and small, deliberate lies. She was good at both by now. The healer thought her shy. The village women thought her cold. The unmated males had long since stopped asking her to the gatherings, and that suited her fine. She had learned early that safety lived in the shadows, and warmth was a luxury she could not afford. The forest thickened around her. Pale light filtered through the canopy, dappling the ground in silver. She breathed in the scent of pine and damp earth, letting it steady her. Out here, alone, she could stop pretending. She could stop holding everything so tightly inside. She reached the clearing she had claimed as her own, a small hollow ringed by ancient oaks. No one came this far from the village. No one had reason to. The ground was soft with old leaves, and a fallen log made a place to leave her clothes, folded neatly as always. Ara undressed slowly, her fingers trembling. Not from cold, from the weight of what she carried, every day, every moment. The secret that would kill her, if anyone ever learned the truth. She closed her eyes and let the shift take her. The change rolled through her body like a wave, familiar and overwhelming all at once. Bones stretched and reformed. Her senses sharpened, flooding her with the night's symphony of sound and scent. When she opened her eyes again, the world had transformed into a tapestry of silver and shadow. She stood on 4 legs, her breath misting in the cool air. Her fur was white. Pure, unblemished white, glowing faintly in the moonlight like fresh snow under stars. It was beautiful. It was damning. Ara's wolf shook herself, restless after a month of silence. The animal wanted to run, to howl, to feel the ground blur beneath her paws. But even here, even alone, Ara kept her voice locked tight. A howl could carry for miles. Someone might hear. Someone might come looking. So she ran instead, letting the movement burn away the tension coiled in her chest. She wove between the trees, her paws barely touching the earth. The forest welcomed her as it always did, indifferent to her fear, patient with her solitude. She did not know how long she ran. Time moved differently in this shape, but eventually her wolf grew tired, and the warm pull of the moon began to ease. Ara returned to the clearing, shifted back, and dressed in the dark. Her hands were steadier now, her heart quieter. She walked back toward the village, the sky overhead deepening to black. The communal hall still glowed with firelight, but the laughter had faded. People would be heading home soon, sated and content, their wolves satisfied by the pack's presence. Ara felt the loneliness like a stone in her chest, smooth and cold from years of carrying. She slipped back into the healer's cottage through the rear door, careful not to wake the old woman who slept in the room above. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers. Ara added a log, then sat on the bench by the work table, staring at the flames. She thought, as she always did on these nights, of her family. Her mother's laugh, her father's steady hands, her younger brother's bright, fearless grin. All of them gone, all of them killed, because of what they were. Because someone had learned the truth about their bloodline. and rare wolves fetched high prices from the wrong kind of people, or sparked fear in the hearts of those who believed old stories about power and prophecy. Ara had been 15 when the hunters came. She had survived only because her father shoved her into the root cellar and told her to stay silent no matter what she heard. She had obeyed. And she had heard everything. Eric closed her eyes, pushing the memory back down where it belonged. 5 years had passed, but grief did not obey time. It waited, patient, in the quiet moments when her guard dropped. She had run after that night, far and fast, until she crossed into the border territories, where pack lines blurred and no one asked too many questions. She had found work with the healer, a gruff old woman who needed an extra pair of hands and didn't care where they came from. Ara had made herself useful, quiet, forgettable, and every full moon she disappeared into the woods alone, hiding the one thing that would destroy the small, fragile life she had built. The fire crackled softly. Ara pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders and allowed herself one small comfort. She was still alive, still free. That had to be enough. The next morning dawned gray and cool, the sky heavy with unshed rain. Ara woke early, as she always did, and began her work. She ground herbs for poultices, boiled water for tinctures, and swept the cottage floor while the healer muttered over her morning tea. The old woman's name was Maris, and she had lived in the border village for 40 years. Her wolf was small and brown, unassuming, much like the woman herself, but her hands were skilled, and her knowledge deep. Ara had learned much in 5 years under her roof. "You're quiet today," Maris said, glancing up from her cup. Ara smiled faintly. "I'm always quiet." "Quieter than usual, then." Maris's pale eyes studied her for a moment, then dismissed whatever she saw. "We'll need more willow bark. The young ones have been rough this week, scrapes and sprains everywhere." "I'll go to the grove this afternoon," Ara said. Maris nodded and returned to her tea. Ara moved through the morning tasks with practiced efficiency. A mother brought her son with a fever. A young man came in with a gash across his forearm from a careless blade. An elder needed a salve for aching joints. Ara tended each one with gentle hands and few words, her presence calm and steady. No one looked at her too closely. No one ever did. By midday, the rain began, soft and persistent. Ara pulled on her cloak and took a basket from the hook by the door. The willowbark grove lay a mile to the east, along the edge of the territory. It was an easy walk, even in the rain. Maris waved her off without looking up from her mortar. Ara stepped outside into the drizzle, breathing in the scent of wet earth and pine. The village was quiet, most people indoors waiting out the weather. She walked the eastern path, her boots squelching softly in the mud. She did not know, as she walked, that the Border Patrol had been tracking rogue wolves for 3 days. She did not know that the Alpha King himself rode with them, his patience worn thin by attacks on his territory. She did not know that the rogues had turned south toward the village, and that the clash would come within the hour. All she knew was the rain on her face and the weight of the basket in her hand, and the quiet, fragile hope that today would be like every other day, unremarkable, safe, hidden. The first howl cut through the rain like a blade. Ara froze on the path, her basket slipping from her hand. The willow bark scattered across the mud, forgotten. Her heart slammed against her ribs as the sound echoed through the trees, wild and furious and far too close. Rogues. She had heard stories. Everyone had. Wolves without pack or law, driven mad by isolation, or cast out for crimes too dark to name. They moved in loose bands, raiding borders, killing for sport or sustenance or simple cruelty. The village was half a mile behind her, the grove still a 1/4 mile ahead. Ara stood alone on the path between them, exposed and vulnerable in her human shape. Another howl rose, this one answered by two more. They were converging, moving fast. Ara's instincts screamed at her to run, but her mind worked faster. If she ran toward the village, she might lead them straight to families and children. If she ran deeper into the woods, she would be alone and easy prey. She had no good choice. She chose the woods. Ara bolted off the path, her cloak catching on low branches as she plunged into the underbrush. The rain fell harder now, cold and stinging against her face. Her boots slid on wet roots and stones, but she kept moving, her breath harsh in her throat. Behind her, the howls grew louder. Closer. She could hear them crashing through the trees now, their snarls sharp and eager. Her wolf surged inside her, desperate to break free, to fight or flee on 4 legs instead of 2. But shifting meant revealing herself. It meant the end of everything she had built. Ara ran faster. The forest opened suddenly into a rocky clearing, and she stumbled to a halt. Ahead, the ground dropped away into a steep ravine. Behind, the rogues closed in, their shapes flickering between the trees. She was trapped. 3 wolves emerged from the shadows, their eyes gleaming with feral hunger. Their fur was matted and scarred, their bodies lean and hard. The largest one, a brindled male with a torn ear, lowered his head and growled. Ara backed toward the ravine's edge, her hands raised. "I'm no threat to you," she said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. "I'm just a healer. Let me go." The brindled wolf snarled and lunged. Ara threw herself sideways, hitting the ground hard as his jaws snapped shut where her throat had been. She rolled, scrambling to her feet, but the other 2 were already circling, cutting off any escape. This was it, the choice she had run from for 5 years. Shift and survive, or die here in the mud as a human. Her wolf rose inside her, fierce and ready, her white fur already rippling beneath her skin. And then the forest exploded with new sound. A deep, commanding howl shattered the air, and the rogues froze. Ara's breath caught as massive shapes poured into the clearing, wolves twice the size of the rogues moving with lethal precision. The border patrol. The pack wolves struck like thunder. The brindled rogue was slammed to the ground before he could turn. The other 2 scattered, but the patrol was faster, cutting them down with ruthless efficiency. Blood stained the rain-slick earth. The fight was over in moments. Ara pressed herself against a tree, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She watched as the patrol wolves shifted, their bodies reforming into powerful men and women clad in traveling leathers, their faces hard and scarred from years of service. And then she saw him. He stood at the center of the clearing, taller than the rest, his presence commanding even before he moved. His hair was dark, nearly black, rain slicked against his skull. His eyes were pale gray, sharp as winter ice, and they swept the clearing with the practiced assessment of a man who had seen too much violence and learned to master it. His jaw was strong, shadowed with stubble, and a thin scar traced the line of his cheekbone. His shoulders were broad beneath the dark cloak that hung from them, and when he moved, it was with the controlled grace of a predator who had nothing left to prove. The Alpha King. Ara had never seen him before, but she knew him instantly. Everyone in the territories knew of Veyron, the king who had united the fractured packs after the wars, the wolf who ruled with an iron will tempered by cold justice. He turned his gaze toward her, and Ara felt the weight of it like a physical blow. "You're injured," he said. His voice was low, roughened by command and weariness. It carried across the clearing despite the rain. Ara looked down and realized blood was soaking through her sleeve. The brindled rogue's claws had caught her when she rolled. The wound throbbed now that the shock was fading, hot and sharp. "It's nothing," she said. Veyron's eyes narrowed. He crossed the clearing in 3 strides, and before she could protest, he was standing in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He smelled of rain and leather and something darker, like smoke and stone. "Let me see," he said. It was not a request. Aura hesitated, then pulled back her cloak. The gash ran from her shoulder to her elbow, deep enough to scar. Veyron's jaw tightened. "You need a healer," he said. "I am a healer." His gaze flicked to her face, something shifting behind the cold gray of his eyes. "Then you know this needs stitching." One of the patrol wolves approached, a woman with short auburn hair and a bow slung across her back. "My king, the rogues are dead. But there may be more in the area. We should move." Veyron nodded without looking away from Aura. "Gather the witnesses. Everyone who saw the attack shifts for identification. I want loyalty confirmed before we leave this territory." Aura's blood went cold. "I wasn't part of the fight," she said quickly. I was gathering willow bark. I don't need to." "You were here." Veyron's voice was firm, but not unkind. "You saw the rogues. You're a witness. Protocol applies to everyone." The woman with the bow was already calling the others. 2 more villagers had been caught near the clearing's edge. A young man and an older woman, both pale with shock. They shifted without protest, their wolves small and brown and harmless. Aura's hands began to tremble. She could refuse. She could run. But there were a dozen patrol wolves surrounding the clearing now, and Veyron stood directly in front of her, his presence as immovable as stone. If she ran, they would chase her. If she fought, they would kill her. If she shifted, "I can't," she whispered. Veyron's expression softened, just slightly. "You're afraid." She nodded, unable to speak. "I give you my word," he said quietly. His voice meant only for her. "No one here will harm you. You have my protection. But I need to see your wolf." Aura looked into his eyes and saw no cruelty there. Only certainty. And something else, something that might have been understanding, buried beneath years of duty and loss. She thought of her family. Of the hunters. Of the 5 years she had spent hiding. Alone and silent and safe. And she realized, with a sick, sinking feeling, that her safety had just run out. She closed her eyes and let the shift take her. The change rolled through her body, and when she opened her eyes again, the world had sharpened into silver and shadow. She stood on 4 legs in the center of the clearing, her white fur glowing faintly in the rain. The silence was absolute. Every wolf, every human, every breath in the clearing stopped. Aura's ears flattened against her skull. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear into the trees and never stop running. But Veyron stepped forward, his gaze locked on hers, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he shifted. His wolf was enormous, easily twice her size, his fur dark as midnight and his eyes the same pale gray. He moved toward her slowly, his posture careful, non-threatening. When he was close enough to touch, he lowered his head and breathed in her scent. Aura's wolf trembled but held still. Veyron shifted back, his expression unreadable. "A white wolf," he said quietly, "rare beyond measure." The woman with the bow exhaled sharply. "My king, the old bloodlines. I know what she is." Veyron's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. He turned to his patrol. "This woman is under my personal authority. No one speaks of what they've seen here." "That's an order." He looked back at Aura, still in her wolf form, still frozen with fear. "Shift back," he said gently. "You're safe. I swear it." Aura shifted. her body trembling as the cold rain soaked through her torn sleeve. Veyron removed his cloak and draped it over her shoulders before she could protest. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ara," she whispered. "Ara." He repeated it as though committing it to memory. "You'll come with me to the capital. I have questions, and you'll answer them where it's safe to do so. I can't leave. You have no choice." His voice was firm but not harsh. "Your life changed the moment you shifted in front of me. Staying here puts you and this village at risk. You'll be protected in the capital. You have my word." Ara looked into his eyes and saw the truth there. He meant what he said, but she also saw the bars of a cage closing around her, invisible but unbreakable. Her hidden life was over. Ara's knees buckled, and Veyron's hand shot out, steadying her before she fell. His grip was firm but careful, his palm warm against her rain-chilled arm. "Easy," he said quietly. "Breathe." She tried. Her lungs felt tight, her throat closed. The weight of his cloak around her shoulders should have been comforting, but all she could feel was the eyes of the patrol on her back, the shock still rippling through the clearing like aftershocks from a quake. The woman with the bow stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "My king, the council will want to know. The council will know what I tell them." Veyron's voice carried an edge now, sharp enough to cut. "And I'll tell them when I'm ready, not before." The woman hesitated, then nodded and stepped back. Veyron turned his attention back to Ara, his gray eyes searching her face. "Can you walk?" She nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. "Good." He released her arm but stayed close, his presence a shield between her and the others. "We'll get your wound tended, then we leave. My healer travels with the patrol." "I can tend it myself," Ara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can't stitch your own shoulder." His tone left no room for argument. He gestured to one of the younger patrol wolves, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes. "Taryn, bring the medkit." The man jogged off toward the edge of the clearing where their gear was stashed. Ara pulled Veyron's cloak tighter around herself, trying to stop the trembling that had nothing to do with the cold. Her mind raced, cycling through every possible escape and finding none. She could run now, while they were distracted, but her wolf was exhausted from the shift, and her arm was bleeding freely. She wouldn't make it a mile. And even if she did, where would she go? The border territories were the last place that had felt even remotely safe. Beyond them lay the heartlands, where pack law was ironclad and strangers were questioned on sight, or the wildlands, where rogues and worse things hunted anything that moved. She was trapped. Truly, completely trapped. Taryn returned with a leather satchel and handed it to Veyron. The king crouched beside a flat stone, laying out supplies with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. Needle, thread, clean cloth, a small flask. "Sit," he said, nodding toward the stone. Ara sat, her legs grateful for the support. Veyron knelt in front of her, his movements calm and deliberate. He uncorked the flask, and the sharp scent of alcohol filled the air. "This will hurt," he said. "I know." He poured the alcohol over the gash, and Ara bit down hard on her lip to keep from crying out. The pain was bright and immediate, burning through her arm like fire. Veyron's free hand steadied her shoulder, his touch gentle despite his strength. "You've done this before," she said through gritted teeth, needing something to focus on besides the pain. "Too many times." He threaded the needle with steady hands, his gaze focused on the wound. "Hold still." The first stitch pulled tight, and Ara closed her eyes. She had stitched others countless times, but being on this side of the needle was different. Each pull of thread was a reminder of how fragile skin was, how easily a body could be opened and hurt. Veyron worked in silence, his hands sure and careful. The rain had softened to a drizzle, and the clearing was quiet except for the low murmur of the patrol regrouping near the tree line. "Why are you doing this?" Ara asked after a moment, her voice thin. "You're a king. You don't stitch wounds in the rain." Veyron didn't look up. "I've been a soldier longer than I've been a king, and a healer before that." She blinked, startled. "You were a healer." "Field medic, in the wars." He tied off another stitch, his jaw tight. "Learned fast." "Had to." Ara studied his face, the hard lines of it, the scar along his cheekbone. She wondered how many wounds he carried beneath his skin, the kind that never showed. "I'm sorry," she said softly. His hands paused for just a breath. Then he resumed stitching. "For what?" "For this. For being a complication." Veyron's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "You're not a complication. You're a mystery." "That's worse." "Maybe." He finished the last stitch and tied it off, then cleaned the wound again before wrapping it with a strip of clean linen. "But mysteries can be solved. Complications just complicate." He sat back on his heels, his gaze meeting hers. Up close, his eyes were startling, pale gray ringed with darker charcoal. There was weariness in them, and something else, something that looked almost like loneliness. "Thank you," Ara said. Veyron nodded and rose, offering her his hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet with easy strength. The woman with the bow approached again, her expression tight. "My king, we need to move. The village is sending scouts. They'll have seen the fight." "Let them come." Veyron's voice was calm. "I'll speak to their alpha. Ara needs to gather her things before we leave." Ara's heart lurched. "My things?" "You're coming with us." "I told you that." He turned to the woman. "Liz, take 2 wolves and escort her to the healer's cottage. Let her pack what she needs. Nothing more. We leave within the hour." Liz nodded, though her mouth pressed into a thin line. Veyron looked back at Ara, and his voice softened. "I know this isn't what you want, but it's the only way to keep you safe. Trust me." Ara wanted to argue, wanted to scream that she had been safe, that she had built a life here, small and quiet and hers. But the words died in her throat because she knew the truth. The moment her white wolf had stood in that clearing, her life here had ended. There was no going back. "1 hour," she said quietly. Veyron inclined his head, something that might have been respect in the gesture. 1 hour. Liz motioned for Ara to follow, and 2 younger wolves fell in beside them as they left the clearing. Ara glanced back once and saw Veyron standing in the rain, his patrol gathered around him, his cloak gone, and his shoulders squared against the weight of whatever came next. Their eyes met across the distance, and something unspoken passed between them. A promise, a warning, a beginning. Then the trees closed in, and he was gone. The walk back to the village felt like a dream, distant and unreal. Liz said nothing, her bow slung across her back, her amber eyes scanning the forest with professional alertness. The 2 wolves flanking Ara kept a respectful distance, but their presence was unmistakable. She was a prisoner, gently handled, carefully guarded, but a prisoner all the same. The healer's cottage appeared through the trees, its chimney trailing a thin line of smoke. Ara's chest tightened, 5 years she had lived here. 5 years of mornings, grinding herbs and evenings by the fire, of Maris's gruff kindness, and the small, steady rhythms of a life that asked nothing of her but her hands and her silence. Now it was ending. All of it. Liz stopped at the door. 10 minutes. Pack light. Ara nodded and stepped inside. Maris looked up from her mortar, her pale eyes sharp. You're bleeding. It's tended. Ara crossed to the small room in the back that had been hers, barely larger than a closet. She pulled her traveling bag from beneath the cot and began folding clothes with shaking hands. Maris appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. You're leaving. I have to. The patrol? Ara nodded, not trusting her voice. Maris was silent for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and pressed a small leather pouch into Ara's hands. Herbs. The ones you'll need. Don't forget to boil the root before grinding it, or it'll burn the skin. Ara's throat closed. Maris. No goodbyes. The old woman's voice was firm, but her eyes were wet. You've been a good apprentice. Better than I deserved. Now go, and don't look back. Ara tucked the pouch into her bag, blinking hard against the sting in her eyes. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. So she nodded once, shouldered her bag, and walked out the door. Liz was waiting. Ready? Ara looked back at the cottage one last time, at the curl of smoke and the door left open, at the life she was leaving behind. Then she turned toward the forest, toward the Alpha King and the capital, and the unknown future waiting in the shadows. Ready, she said, and meant it. The patrol moved through the forest in tight formation, 6 wolves ranging ahead and behind, while Veyron walked at the center with Ara beside him. Liz kept to his right, her bow ready, her gaze never still. The rain had stopped, but the trees still dripped, and the ground beneath their boots was soft with mud. Ara's arm throbbed with each step, the stitches pulling tight. She kept her eyes on the path ahead, her bag heavy on her good shoulder, and tried not to think about how far the capital was. 2 days, travel, maybe 3. 2 days of walking beside a king who knew what she was. 2 days of being watched, questioned, judged. 2 days before her fate was decided by people she had never met. Veyron walked with his hands loose at his sides, his stride long and unhurried, despite the pace the patrol kept. He had not spoken since they left the village, but Ara felt his attention on her like a weight. Not unkind, but constant. After an hour, he broke the silence. How long have you been hiding? Ara's breath caught. She considered lying, then realized there was no point. 5 years. 5 years alone. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Yes. No pack. No family. She shook her head. Veyron was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. That takes strength. Or desperation. Both, Ara said softly. He glanced at her, something shifting in his expression. Why the border territories? Because no one asks questions there, and no one looks too closely. Until today. Until today. They walked in silence again, the forest thick around them. Ara's legs were beginning to ache, but she did not slow. She would not give them a reason to think her weak. Liz called a halt near midday, and the patrol scattered to check the perimeter while Veyron motioned for Ara to sit on a fallen log. She sank down gratefully, her arm burning now, the adrenaline that had carried her this far finally fading. Tehran approached with a water skin and a small packet of dried meat. You need to eat, he said, his voice gentle. Ara took the offerings with a nod of thanks. The meat was tough and salty, but her stomach was empty, and she ate without tasting it. Veyron sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. He pulled a strip of jerky from his own pack and chewed in silence, his gaze distant. "You said your family was killed," he said after a moment. Ara's hands stilled. "Yes." "For your bloodline." "Yes." Veyron turned to look at her, his gray eyes sharp. "Who were the hunters?" "I don't know." The words tasted bitter. "I was 15. My father hid me. By the time I came out, they were gone. And so was my family." His jaw tightened. "You didn't go to the local pack for help." "I couldn't." Ara's voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't know who to trust. My father always said..." He said, "Rare wolves drew the wrong kind of attention. That people would either fear us or want to use us. So I ran. And I kept running until I found a place where no one cared who I was." Veyron was silent for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, "I'm sorry." Ara looked at him, startled by the softness in his voice. "I've seen what hunters do," he continued, his gaze distant again. "I've buried the bodies they leave behind. It's one of the reasons I unified the packs, so no one would have to face that kind of evil alone." Something loosened in Ara's chest, a knot she hadn't realized she was still carrying. "You lost someone too." It wasn't a question. She could see it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his hands curled into fists before he forced them to relax. "My mate," Veyron said, his voice low. 10 years ago. Raiders attacked a border settlement. She was there visiting her sister. By the time I arrived with reinforcements, it was too late." Ara's breath caught. "I'm sorry." "So am I." He looked at her then, and the grief in his eyes was raw and deep, a wound that had never fully healed. After she died, I thought I would never feel anything again. Anger, yes. Duty, always. But not this." "Not what?" Ara asked, though she thought she knew. Veyron's gaze held hers. "The need to protect someone. Not because it's my responsibility, but because I can't imagine letting anything happen to them." The air between them felt suddenly fragile, like glass pulled too thin. Ara's heart hammered in her chest, and she did not know what to say. Liz appeared at the edge of the clearing, her expression carefully neutral. "My king, we should move. We want to reach the way station before dark." Veyron rose, his mask of command sliding back into place. But when he offered Ara his hand, his grip was gentle, and his thumb brushed once across her knuckles before he let go. They walked until the sun began to sink behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The way station appeared as the last light faded, a sturdy stone building with a slate roof and smoke rising from its chimney. The patrol filed inside, and Ara found herself in a large common room, warmed by a roaring fire. Benches lined the walls, and a long table filled the center. The patrol moved with easy familiarity, shedding packs and weapons, calling greetings to the station keeper. Veyron guided Ara to a bench near the fire, then disappeared into a back room with Liz. Ara sat alone, her hands folded in her lap, feeling the weight of curious stares from the younger wolves. Taryn brought her a bowl of stew and a hunk of bread, then sat down beside her. "First time traveling with the patrol?" Ara nodded. "It gets easier," he said with a kind smile. "The king's a good man. Stern, but fair. He'll keep you safe." "Why does he care?" The question slipped out before Ara could stop it. Taryn's smile faded. "Because it's who he is. He's lost too much to let anyone else suffer if he can stop it. He paused, then added quietly, "And because I think you remind him that there are still things worth protecting in this world." Before Ara could respond, Veyron emerged from the back room. He crossed to her, his expression unreadable. "There's a private room upstairs. You'll sleep there tonight. Lys will stand watch outside your door." "I don't need a guard," Ara said. "You do." His voice was firm. "Not because I don't trust you. Because I don't trust anyone else not to ask questions. I'm not ready to answer." He offered his hand again, and after a moment, Ara took it. He led her up a narrow staircase to a small room with a single bed, a wash basin, and a window overlooking the darkened forest. "Rest," he said. "We have a long walk tomorrow." Ara set her bag down and turned to face him. "What happens when we reach the capital?" Veyron's expression softened. "I'll present you to the council. They'll have questions. But I'll be there, and I won't let them hurt you. You have my word." "Why?" Ara asked, the question rising from some deep, aching place inside her. "Why does my word matter to you?" Veyron stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint silver threaded through his dark hair, the lines of weariness etched around his eyes. "Because you've been alone for 5 years, carrying a burden that would have broken most people, and you're still standing, still fighting." He paused, his voice dropping. "And because when I look at you, I feel something I thought I'd lost. Hope." Ara's throat closed. She wanted to say something, but the words tangled in her chest. Veyron reached out and gently touched her cheek, just once, his palm warm against her skin. "Sleep, Ara. Tomorrow will come soon enough." He left, closing the door softly behind him. Ara stood alone in the small room, her heart pounding, her cheeks still warm from his touch. And for the first time in 5 years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she was not alone anymore. Ara woke to the sound of boots on cobblestone and voices calling orders in the gray light before dawn. She sat up, disoriented, her arms stiff and aching beneath the bandage. The window showed a courtyard below, patrol wolves moving with purpose, their breath misting in the cold air. The capital. They had arrived. A soft knock came at the door, and Lys entered without waiting for an answer. She carried a bundle of dark wool. "The king sent these. You can't meet the council in torn traveling clothes." Ara took the bundle, her fingers tracing the fine weave. A simple dress, dark green, well made, but not ornate. Practical. She looked up at Lys, searching for some clue in the woman's expression. "What will they do to me?" Ara asked quietly. Lys's mouth tightened. "That depends on what you tell them, and whether the king can hold them off long enough to hear it." She paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I've never seen him protect anyone the way he's protecting you. That matters. More than you know." She left before Ara could respond. Ara dressed slowly, her hands trembling. The dress fit well, falling to mid-calf, the sleeves long enough to hide her bandaged arm. She braided her hair, dark and straight, pulling it back from her face. In the small mirror above the wash basin, she looked like a stranger. Too pale, too frightened. She closed her eyes and breathed. When she opened them again, Veyron was standing in the doorway. He wore formal leathers now, black and silver, a heavy cloak fastened at his shoulders with an iron clasp shaped like a wolf's head. His dark hair was pulled back, revealing the strong lines of his face, the scar that traced his cheekbone. He looked every inch a king. Distant, untouchable, Then his gaze found hers, and his expression softened. "You look ready," he said. "I'm not." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Veyron crossed the room in 3 strides and took her hands in his. His palms were warm, calloused, steady. "Listen to me. The council is made of old wolves with old fears. They'll see your bloodline and think of prophecies and power struggles and threats to the order they've built. But I won't let them touch you. Do you understand?" Ara nodded, though her throat was tight. "Answer their questions honestly," he continued. "Don't hide, don't apologize for what you are, and stay close to me, always. What if they don't listen to you?" Veyron's jaw tightened. "Then they'll learn that some orders are not requests." He released her hands and stepped back, and the king's mask slid into place again. "Come, we don't keep the council waiting." The council chamber sat at the heart of the capital's great hall, a circular room ringed with stone benches rising in tiers. Torches burned in iron sconces, casting flickering shadows across the carved walls. A dozen elders sat waiting, their faces hard and weathered, their eyes sharp. Ara followed Veyron through the tall doors, Lys and Taryn flanking them. Her boots echoed on the stone floor, each step louder than the last. She could feel the weight of the elders, stares, assessing, judging, dissecting her with their eyes. Veyron stopped in the center of the room, his presence commanding without a word. Ara stood beside him, her hands folded, her chin lifted despite the fear coiling in her chest. An older man with silver hair and a scarred face rose from the highest bench. His voice was deep and rough. "Alpha King, you bring a stranger before the council. Explain." "Her name is Ara," Veyron said, his voice calm and clear. "She is under my personal protection. She will answer your questions, and you will treat her with the respect due any wolf in my care." The silver-haired elder's eyes narrowed. "We hear she is a white wolf, a rare bloodline. One that has not been seen in these territories for generations." "That's true," Veyron said. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The elder leaned forward. "The old bloodlines were hunted to extinction for a reason, my king. They carried power that could not be controlled. Power that threatened the balance of the packs. Or power that others feared." Veyron said, his voice hardening. "Fear is not law, and this council does not condemn wolves for what they might be." Another elder rose, a woman with pale eyes and a thin mouth. "We do not condemn, we question, and we protect the packs from threats, known or unknown." She turned her gaze to Ara. "Tell us, girl, who were your parents? What pack did you come from?" Ara's throat tightened. "I came from the Northern Territories. My parents were healers. They kept to themselves. When I was 15, hunters came. My family was killed. I ran." "For 5 years," the woman said, her tone sharp. 5 years hiding. 5 years suppressing your wolf. Why?" "Because I didn't want to die," Ara said quietly. "Or because you had something to hide." The woman's voice was cold. "A rare bloodline. A lone wolf, with no pack, no loyalty. You could be a spy, a weapon planted by enemies we have not yet named." Veyron's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Enough." The woman turned to him, her expression unyielding. "My king, we have a duty, and I have given my word." Veyron's tone brooked no argument. Ara is not a threat. She is a survivor, and she will be treated as such. The silver-haired elder rose again, his gaze steady on Veyron. With respect, my king, your word is not enough in matters that threaten the stability of the realm. The old bloodlines carried gifts. Gifts that could be turned to dark purposes. We must know what she is capable of. Ara's hands curled into fists. She wanted to scream that she was capable of nothing but healing and hiding, that she had spent 5 years making herself invisible because she had no power, no gifts, nothing but a wolf that looked different and a past that haunted her. But Veyron spoke first. Then test her. If you need proof, take it, but you will do so under my supervision, and you will not harm her. The silver-haired elder's expression did not change. Very well. A demonstration, then. Let her shift. Let us see what her wolf truly is. Ara's breath caught. The room felt suddenly airless, the walls closing in. Shifting in the forest had been terrifying. Shifting here, in front of these cold, judging eyes, felt like standing on the edge of an abyss. Veyron's hand brushed hers, just once, a silent reassurance. You don't have to, he said quietly, meant only for her. But Ara knew the truth. If she refused, the council would see guilt, fear, weakness, and they would never stop hunting her, no matter what Veyron promised. She stepped forward, her heart pounding. I'll shift. The silver-haired elder nodded. Proceed. Ara closed her eyes and let the shift take her. The change rolled through her body, familiar now, the world sharpening as her wolf rose to the surface. When she opened her eyes again, she stood on 4 legs in the center of the chamber, her white fur glowing faintly in the torchlight. The silence was absolute. Then the silver-haired elder spoke, his voice low. A true white wolf, pure of line. He turned to the woman beside him. Elder Mareth, what say you? The woman's pale eyes studied Ara with an intensity that made her wolf's hackles rise. The old texts spoke of white wolves who could heal with a touch, who could sense death before it came, who could bind or break pack bonds with their will. She paused. If she carries even a fraction of that power, she is dangerous. Or invaluable, Veyron said, his voice steady. The wars taught us that power is not the enemy. Fear is. And I will not let fear dictate law in my realm. Elder Mareth's expression hardened. Then you take full responsibility for what she may become. I do. The silver-haired elder rose. Very well, but she does not leave the capital without council approval. And she will be watched. For her safety, and ours. Ara shifted back, her body trembling with exhaustion and fear. Veyron stepped forward and draped his cloak over her shoulders before she could speak. She stays with me, he said, his voice brooking no argument. In the royal wing, under my protection. Any who questioned that answer to me. The council murmured, but no one dared speak against him. Veyron turned to Ara, his gray eyes softening. Come, you've endured enough for one day. He led her from the chamber, his hand steady at her back, and Ara followed, her legs weak, her heart still racing. She had survived the council, but she knew, with cold certainty, that her trial had only just begun. Veyron's private chambers lay at the end of a long corridor, lined with tapestries that had faded with age and war. He unlocked the heavy oak door himself, waving away the guard who moved to follow. The room beyond was larger than Ara expected, but warmer too. A fire burned low in the stone hearth. Books lined one wall, maps another. A wide bed stood near the window, its coverings dark and simple. You'll be safe here, Veyron said, closing the door behind them. The council can't reach you. No one enters these rooms without my permission. Ara moved to the window, looking out over the capital's rooftops and the forest beyond. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and drawn, the borrowed dress hanging loose on her frame. She felt untethered, caught between the life she had left and one she could not yet imagine. "I don't understand why you're doing this," she said quietly. Veyron crossed to the hearth and added wood to the fire. The flames leapt higher, casting his face in warm light and shadow. "I told you. You deserve protection. You've given me that." Ara turned to face him. "But this, bringing me here, standing against the council for me, it's more than duty." Veyron straightened, his gaze meeting hers across the room. For a long moment he said nothing, and Ara thought he might retreat behind the wall of command he wore so easily. But then his shoulders dropped, just slightly, and she saw the weariness beneath. "I lost my mate 10 years ago," he said, his voice low. "I told you that. What I didn't tell you is that I thought I would never care about anyone again. Not like that. Not in a way that made me afraid of losing them." He moved closer, stopping a few feet away. Close enough that Ara could see the silver threading through his hair, the lines at the corners of his eyes. "Then you shifted in that clearing," he continued, "and I saw you. Not just your wolf, but you. Alone and terrified and still standing. Still fighting. And something in me woke up." Ara's breath caught. "Veyron, I know it's too fast." His voice roughened. "I know you barely know me, but I haven't felt this protective of anyone since I lost her, and I'm not going to apologize for that." The space between them felt charged, fragile. Ara wanted to step back, to protect herself from the weight of what he was offering. But she was so tired of running, so tired of being alone. "I'm tired too," she whispered. "I've spent 5 years hiding. 5 years never letting anyone close because I was afraid of what they'd see. Afraid of what would happen if they knew." Veyron took another step, closing the distance between them. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair back from her face. His touch was gentle, reverent. "You don't have to hide anymore," he said. "Not from me, not from anyone." Ara looked up into his gray eyes and saw the truth there. He meant it. Every word. And something in her chest cracked open, a dam breaking after years of holding everything back. "I want to trust you," she said, her voice breaking. "I want to believe this is real." "It is." Veyron's hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "I swear to you, Ara, this is real." She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. For the first time in 5 years, she felt safe. Truly, completely safe. And when she opened her eyes again, Veyron was looking at her with something that made her heart stutter. Not just protectiveness. Not just duty. Longing. "I haven't." Ara started, then stopped. Her cheeks warmed. "I haven't let anyone close in so long. I don't know if I remember how." Veyron's expression softened. "We'll figure it out together." He lowered his hand, but did not step back. The fire crackled behind them, casting dancing shadows across the stone walls. Outside, the capital settled into evening quiet, voices fading, doors closing. "Stay here tonight," Veyron said. "In my chambers. I'll take the chair by the fire. You need rest, and I need to know you're safe." Ara shook her head. "I can't take your bed." "You can." His tone left no room for argument, but his eyes were gentle. "Please, Ara, let me do this." She wanted to protest again, but exhaustion was pulling at her limbs, making her thoughts slow and heavy. The bed looked impossibly soft. The room, impossibly warm. and Veyron stood before her like a shield against everything beyond these walls. "All right," she said finally. Relief flickered across his face. He gestured to a small side room. "There's water and clean clothes in there. Take what you need." Ara nodded and moved past him, her arm brushing his. The contact sent a jolt through her, unexpected and electric. She glanced back and found him watching her, his expression unreadable. In the small washroom, Ara stripped off the borrowed dress and cleaned herself with a damp cloth, careful around the stitches in her arm. She found a soft linen shirt that smelled faintly of cedar and smoke, clearly Veyron's. It fell to mid-thigh, and she belted it loosely before stepping back into the main room. Veyron had settled into the chair by the fire, his long legs stretched out before him. He had removed his formal cloak and the silver fastenings, leaving only the dark leather tunic. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered in his eyes. "Better?" he asked. Ara nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "Thank you. For the shirt. Keep it." His voice was quiet. "It suits you better than me." She moved to the bed and climbed beneath the heavy coverings. They were soft, warmer than anything she had slept under in years. She lay on her side, facing the fire, and watched Veyron settle deeper into the chair. "Will you be all right there?" she asked. "I've slept in worse places." He smiled faintly. "Rest, Ara. I'll be here if you need anything." She wanted to say something more, something to fill the space between them, but sleep was already pulling at her. Her eyes drifted closed, and the last thing she saw was Veyron's silhouette against the firelight, steady and watchful. Ara woke sometime in the deep hours of the night. The fire had burned low, and the room was filled with soft shadows. She turned over and saw Veyron still in the chair, his head tilted back, his breathing deep and even. He had stayed, just as he promised. Ara slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, and padded across the cool stone floor. She knelt beside his chair and studied his face in the dim light. Asleep, he looked younger. The lines of command softened, the weariness eased. She reached out, hesitating, then gently touched his hand where it rested on the chair's arm. Veyron's eyes opened, instantly alert. Then he saw her and relaxed. "You should be sleeping," he said, his voice rough with drowsiness. "So should you." Ara did not move her hand. "Come to bed. There's room for both of us." Veyron's gaze searched hers. "Ara, I trust you," she said simply, "and I don't want you to spend the night in a chair when there's a perfectly good bed." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. He rose, unfolding his tall frame, and followed her to the bed. They lay down together, a careful distance between them, the coverings pulled up against the cold. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Ara shifted closer, and Veyron's arm came around her, drawing her against his chest. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. Veyron's hand moved gently through her hair. "For what? For not letting me be alone anymore." His arm tightened around her, just slightly. "You'll never be alone again. I promise you that." Ara closed her eyes, warmth spreading through her chest. And for the first time in 5 years, she let herself believe in something beyond survival. She let herself believe in belonging. Ara woke to pale morning light filtering through the window and the sound of boots on stone somewhere below. For a moment she lay still, breathing in the warmth of the bed and the faint scent of cedar that clung to the pillow. Then memory returned, and with it the weight of everything that had happened. She was in the capital, in the Alpha King's chambers. And yesterday she had stood before the council and shifted, exposing everything she had hidden for 5 years. The bed beside her was empty, the coverings pulled neat. Veyron was already up. Ara rose and dressed in the green wool from the day before, braiding her hair with fingers that trembled slightly. Her arm ached beneath the bandage, but the pain was duller now, manageable. She could hear voices beyond the door, low and urgent. When she stepped into the main room, she found Veyron standing by the window with Liz and Taryn. All three turned as she entered. Veyron's expression softened when he saw her. "You're awake. Good." "What's happened?" Ara asked, reading the tension in the set of his shoulders. "The council convenes again this morning." Veyron's voice was calm, but his jaw was tight. "Elder Merith has called for a formal inquiry into your bloodline. She wants answers about your abilities, your family, everything." Ara's stomach dropped. "I don't have abilities. I can heal small wounds, the same as any pack healer, that's all." "She won't believe that." Lissa's tone was matter-of-fact. "The old bloodlines were said to carry gifts that skipped generations. She'll assume you're hiding something. Or she'll try to force you to prove you're harmless," Taryn added quietly, "which could mean tests, painful ones." Veyron's hand curled into a fist. "That's not going to happen." "My king," Liz said carefully. "The council has the authority to demand proof in matters of realm security. If Mereth pushes hard enough, then I'll push back harder." Veyron turned to Ara, his gray eyes intense. "I won't let them hurt you, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Ara nodded, though fear coiled tight in her chest. "What do you need me to do?" "Stand with me, answer their questions honestly, and let me handle Mereth." He crossed to her and took her hands in his. "I'm going to make a declaration before the council, one that places you under my permanent protection. It's a formal claim, recognized by pack law. Once it's made, no one can touch you without challenging me directly." Ara's breath caught. "A formal claim? That's more than protection. That's..." She trailed off, the implications settling over her like a heavy cloak. "I know what it means." Veyron's voice was steady. "It means I'm naming you as my chosen companion. That you'll stand at my side, not as a prisoner or a ward, but as my equal. It's the only way to shield you from the council's reach." "But you barely know me," Ara whispered. "I know enough." His hands tightened gently around hers. "I know you're strong. I know you've survived things that would have broken most wolves. And I know that when I look at you, I feel something I thought I'd lost forever." He paused, his voice dropping. "But this is your choice, Ara. If you don't want this, if it's too much, I'll find another way. I won't force you into something you're not ready for." Ara looked up into his face, at the honesty there, the quiet hope beneath the king's mask. She thought of the 5 years she had spent alone, always running, always afraid, and she thought of the way Veyron had held her last night, steady and warm, like an anchor in a storm. "What happens after the declaration?" she asked. "You'll have a place here, a home, protection under my name and my authority. The council will have to accept it." Veyron's expression softened. "And we'll have time. Time to know each other. Time to see if what's between us is real, or just two lonely people reaching for comfort." Ara's throat tightened. "And if it's real, then we'll face that together too." She took a shaky breath, then nodded. "All right, make your declaration. I'll stand with you." Relief flooded Veyron's face. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Thank you." An hour later, Ara stood once more in the council chamber, Veyron at her side. The elders filled the stone benches, their faces hard and watchful. Elder Merith sat in the highest seat today, her pale eyes cold as winter ice. The silver-haired elder, whose name Ara had learned was Corvin, opened the session. Alpha King, you requested this assembly. Speak. Veyron stepped forward, his voice carrying clear and strong through the chamber. I come before this council to make a formal declaration under pack law. As Alpha King and sovereign of these territories, I claim Ara of the Northern Bloodlines as my chosen companion. She is under my protection, my authority, and my care. Any challenge to her is a challenge to me. Silence fell like a hammer. Then Elder Mareth rose, her expression carved from stone. This is unprecedented. You cannot simply claim a stranger with no pack ties, no verified history, and expect the council to accept it without question. I'm not asking for acceptance, Veyron said quietly. I'm informing you of my decision. Pack law gives me that right. Pack law also gives this council the right to advise against decisions that endanger the realm. Mareth's voice sharpened. You know nothing of this woman, nothing of what her bloodline may carry. You're risking everything for a stranger you met 3 days ago. I know everything I need to know. Veyron's tone did not waver. And my claim stands. Mareth's mouth thinned. She turned her gaze to Ara. And you, girl, do you accept this claim, or do you seek to manipulate our king for your own gain? Ara felt every eye in the chamber turn to her, the weight of their judgment pressed down like iron. But Veyron's hand brushed hers, just once, and she found her voice. I accept his claim, she said clearly, not because I seek power or position, but because I'm tired of running, tired of being alone, and because he's offered me something I haven't had in 5 years. A chance to belong. Pretty words, Mareth said coldly, but words are cheap. Prove your loyalty. Prove you are what you say you are. She doesn't have to prove anything to you. Veyron's voice cut through the room like a blade. Then you doom yourself, my king. Mareth stepped down from her seat, her gaze fixed on Veyron. You tie yourself to a mystery, a potential threat, and when she brings ruin on this realm, it will be your name and your legacy that burns with it. Then let it burn, Veyron said, and his voice was soft as steel. I've spent 10 years leading through duty alone. I've given everything to these packs, bled for them, buried my dead for them, and now I choose to stand beside someone who reminds me what it means to be more than a king. If you can't accept that, then I accept your resignation from this council. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Mareth's face went white, then red. You would threaten me? For her? I would defend what is mine, Veyron said, as any alpha would. Or have you forgotten what that means? Corvin rose from his seat, his hand raised for silence. Enough. The Alpha King has made his claim under lawful authority. Elder Mareth, you may voice your objection, but you cannot overturn a formal declaration without majority council vote. He looked around the chamber. All who oppose the king's claim stand. Mareth stood, her jaw clenched. 2 other elders rose beside her, old wolves with suspicious eyes. Corvin nodded. 3 opposed. All in favor remained seated. The rest of the council stayed in their seats. Not enthusiastic, Ara could see, but unwilling to challenge their king directly. The claim is recognized, Corvin said. Ara of the Northern Bloodlines is named as chosen companion to Alpha King Veyron. She is afforded all rights and protections of that station. He turned to Mareth. Your objection is noted, but the matter is closed. Mareth's expression was ice and fury. She swept from the chamber without another word, her 2 supporters following. Veyron turned to Ara, and the hardness in his face melted. It's done. You're safe. Ara's legs felt weak. She wanted to laugh, to cry, to collapse. Instead, she took Veyron's offered hand and let him lead her from the chamber, through the heavy doors and into the corridor beyond. When they were alone, Veyron stopped and turned to face her. "Are you all right?" "I think so." Ara's voice shook slightly. I can't quite believe it's real." "It's real." Veyron's hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle. "You're not alone anymore. You have a place here, with me, for as long as you want it." Ara looked up at him, at the warmth in his gray eyes, the quiet strength in every line of him. And she realized with startling clarity that she did want it. All of it. "I want it," she whispered. "I want to stay." Something fierce and bright flared in Veyron's expression. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed his lips against hers. The kiss was gentle, reverent, full of unspoken promise. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "Then you will. And I'll spend every day proving I was right to choose you." Ara's hand came up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "And I'll spend every day proving you can trust me." They stood together in the quiet corridor, the morning light spilling through the high windows, and Ara felt something she had not felt in 5 long years. Peace. Safety. Home. The council had tried to break her, but Valoran had stood firm. And now, with his declaration made and his protection wrapped around her like armor, Ara's white wolf was finally free. She was no longer the girl who hid in the shadows. She was the Alpha King's chosen, and she would stand beside him, come what may.